Okay, and I'm pleased to be joined on the phone right now by Michael Whatley. He's the Executive Vice President of the Consumer Energy Alliance. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me on today.
I appreciate you taking a few minutes to talk a little bit with us. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the Consumer Energy Alliance and what you guys do?
Sure. Well, CEA, we are a national nonprofit trade association, and we've got about 250 different affiliate members all around the country that are energy-consuming groups, like iron and steel producers and manufacturers and chemical producers, as well as, drivers, truckers, airlines, and other folks that use the transportation fuels. And what we do is we take a look at the world of energy policy through the eyes of consumers, and we want to make sure that American energy consumers have access to affordable, reliable energy, both in terms of electricity and natural gas, as well as gasoline, diesel, and jet fuel.
And could you just tell us a little bit about your background? You yourself.
Well, certainly. So I actually spent several years working in the government, and among the different posts that I had is I was the staff director and chief counsel for the Senate Clean Air and Climate Change Subcommittee, and then I also spent a stint working in the Government Affairs shop over at the Department of Energy as Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary there. And my final slot, I ended up being lucky enough to be Chief of Staff for Senator Elizabeth Dole, but have spent, most of my career both in the government as well as with CEA, trying to figure out how we can enact good energy policy here in the United States.
So you're relatively familiar with the bureaucracy in Washington, then, and you kind of know how to navigate that sort of thing.
Well, we do, and it's really interesting because you get a perspective when you spend as much time, working in the administration and working with Congress to realize that although they have definite rules and they have regulations that govern the process, at the end of the day, there's a political call that's going to be made. And when you look at it in terms of what we're seeing on the climate change right now, there's a definite decision that has been made at the White House, communicated over to the folks at EPA and the Department of Energy and all the other agencies that are out there saying, hey, we are going to take steps to reduce coal. We're going to take steps to increase renewable energy, and we're going to take steps to reduce reliance on oil through gasoline and diesel. And almost every decision that we see coming out of this administration follows that general path. And the GHG rules that were just announced yesterday are unfortunately only the latest version of that same song and dance.
Well, and we've talked a little bit here in the last couple of days about these new rules. But for those that are uninitiated, could you just give us kind of a little bit of a rundown of what these rules actually mean? Sure.
The rules themselves are going to require two different drops in terms of carbon emissions that are coming from existing coal-fired power plants. And one is a 25% reduction by the year 2025, and the second is a 30% reduction by the year 2030. Now, these follow on a series of regulations that were proposed last year about this time, looking at new coal-fired power plants, which were so severe that they basically ensured that no new coal-fired power plants could ever be built. And what EPA has done here is basically said that we're going to tell each state how much they have to reduce the carbon emissions from coal-fired power plants and allow the states to come up with a plan. The problem is when you're talking about carbon emissions of such a deep magnitude here, really what they're telling each state is you figure out how you're going to shut down coal-fired power plants, and we'll leave the details up to you guys. So it really is almost an unfunded mandate approach.
Well, and yesterday we hear Jay Carney mentioning that the states have flexibility. That's basically what he's talking about. The flexibility is in you decide how you want to shut the coal plants down. That's the only flexibility they have, right?
Well, that is really the only way that you're going to be able to get the reductions of the magnitude that are called for in this rule. And certainly there are efficiency programs that can be put in place by the state so that, if people use less electricity, then they will have less emissions coming from those plants. And there are some technologies that can help reduce the carbon emissions at existing coal-fired power plants, but those really are not going to be significant savings in terms of like what this program is looking at. So, our chief concern as we're looking at this rule and starting to have some conversations with various states around the country is, are you going to have the flexibility? Are you going to be able to achieve any of these reductions without shutting down coal-fired power plants? And we're a little bit concerned that the answer is going to be no.
Well, I know you mentioned the rules that were enacted last year. It pretty much made sure that we actually have one of the very last coal-fired power plants that was built, the Dry Fork plant here in Gillette. And I've been in the control room and I've seen the big screen that has all the readouts of the emissions that plant puts out. And it's one of the cleanest plants in the world, and even that is nowhere near meeting these new regulations. It's going to be a major problem.
Well, it really is, and I think that from the consumer's perspective, the way we kind of take a look at these things is, when you're going home and you turn on the lights, you don't really care if that electricity comes from coal or natural gas or nuclear or renewables. What you care about is it reliable. When you flip the switch, is the light actually going to come on or not? And what is the rate that you're going to pay for it? And so, if we're not in a position to build new coal-fired power plants that are cleaner than the existing ones, and then on top of that, we're going to have reductions that are going to be required from the existing ones that, frankly, you can't meet any other way than by building new coal-fired power plants. That puts you into process loop where really what you're going to have to do is bring new natural gas plants online, try and build new nuclear plants, or bring on new renewables. And, it takes us away from the healthy fuel mix that we have in the United States. And, the EPA has done some analysis that says if you shut down the coal the way that they're going to shut down the coal, that it's going to raise natural gas prices, which will raise the electricity prices there. And certainly new nuclear plants are extraordinarily expensive to build, and and the renewables are much more expensive in terms of what your baseline coal is as well. So, no matter how you slice this up, the concern is, can you get alternatives in place, and what kind of price impacts are we going to see? And not surprisingly, we've already seen some analysis that's coming out saying this will have tremendously more expensive electricity coming out of it than we do today.
Well, again, I think most people, at least in my listening area, understand that coal is the most efficient as far as dollars per megawatt hour. Where do you see prices going? Do you have any particular numbers where you see prices going from here?
Not yet, and I think that's going to depend really in large part on how each state wants to go about getting the reductions that they're going to be required to pull here. And so, we're almost going to have to run a state-by-state analysis as people try and figure out how to adapt to these rules. But the one thing that I think is very certain is that we are looking at substantial increases because your typical difference in the spread between, the cost of an existing coal-fired power plant versus the renewables or versus a new nuclear plant or even a new natural gas plant, you're talking pretty big dollars and cents here. And, for an average American family, if you start, having to spend maybe $500, maybe $1,000, maybe $1,500 a year more, for your electricity, then that's money that you can't spend on food or on clothes or on vacations or anything else.
Well, and it definitely has a domino effect through the whole economy as well. Not only are private citizens going to see an increased power bill, but the restaurants, the car dealers, the radio stations, everybody's going to see an increase, and that's going to just raise the entire cost of living for everyone.
It really is, and I think that the fact that you have, such a big, broad, spread of groups that are very, very concerned about these rules, whether it's the small businesses from the Chamber of Commerce to the major manufacturers, that across the board, everybody has got a lot of concern on this. As you said, if you take the electricity rates and put them through the roof, then steel costs more. Food costs cost more. The manufacturing of furniture, the manufacturing of almost everything that we use in our homes is going to go up exponentially, which means, people are going to want to buy less of them, and transportation costs are going to be affected, and the overall economy is going to take a hit. One of the studies that we've seen has said that, these impacts could end up costing, over 200,000 jobs per year in reduced, manufacturing and economic impacts that are going to come out of these higher electricity prices.
And I think I saw that number this morning. I think it was 260,000 jobs, and I think 50 some odd billion per year in cost to the economy. So now that these rules have been put out, is there anything that we can do about it?
Yeah, and I'm really glad you asked that question, because what EPA has done is they've announced that they're going to officially propose these rules, and when the rules are officially proposed, which will probably take place sometime over the next several weeks, they're going to initiate a public comment period. And so it's going to be very important for when that public comment period gets triggered for people to weigh in. And they need to weigh in at EPA, and they need to talk about what the impacts would be in terms of the coal country getting hammered by, using less coal, but also, what are the impacts of higher electricity prices going to be? And they also need to weigh in with their congressmen and senators. It's very, very important to get Congress to engage here, because Congress ultimately has the ability to push back on EPA and get them to move these proposed regulations into line with something that's going to be much more reasonable in terms of the long-term costs.
Well, and with these with these comment periods, we've dealt with a few of these recently, and of course I'll get out the information to my listeners when the proposal is out, but officially out. But I guess it's just going to be a matter if enough people speak up that maybe we'd be able to do something.
I think that's right. At the end of the day, we still are, a democracy, and we still are a country where the government takes the voice of the people very seriously. And so it's going to be real important for people to get smart on this issue and to be able to weigh in. And certainly folks can go to our website, consumerenergyalliance.org, and find out more information about the rules and about, the comment period and how they can weigh in. And then, you guys are very, very blessed coming from Wyoming to have, two senators and congressmen who just absolutely get it, and who are really, really good on this issue. But they need to hear from people, what problems these rules are going to cause, so that they can go in and engage in the Senate, engage in the House, and engage with the White House to tell them that they need to trim these back.
Well, and with an election coming up, I mean, it might be a good chance to maybe put some pressure on some people in some other states that might be up for election too.
Yeah, that is absolutely right. And Consumer Energy Alliance will be working with a really broad group of different stakeholder groups and citizens from all across the country to go into the critical states that are going to matter here. States like Montana, where you've got a Senate seat that's up and going to be very pivotal, in South Dakota, where you've got another seat that's up here, as well as Pennsylvania and Ohio and West Virginia, eastern coal states that have really tough Senate and governor's races, and make sure that folks understand, the people that you're electing are going to be the guys who are either going to push back against these rules or are going to embrace them and push for them.
Well, and it can. I mean, these energy issues can be a bipartisan thing. I mean, I have family in West Virginia, and I know I know even the Democrats in West Virginia are on board with this, so this can be a bipartisan thing.
Well, it absolutely is, and I think you mentioned West Virginia. Senator Joe Manchin has been perhaps the strongest advocate for the coal miners and coal country of anybody in the Senate, and has been great to work with. And we see that with Senator Mary Landrieu, who is the chair of the Senate Energy Committee, who has been very, very committed to making sure that we have a rational energy policy that's going to be here. And it certainly, in terms of the past presidents, we've had presidents that have been good and presidents that have been bad. But I'll say this, you take the partisanship out of it. This particular administration and this particular EPA over the course of the last 5 years has been so much more aggressive than anything that we've seen before, and really truly has put rule after rule after regulation after rule in place that are having a negative effect. And a lot of folks are calling it a war on coal. I think that's probably a fairly good place to call it.
Well, and out here we call it the war on Wyoming too, which is probably just as accurate. And I know you're probably pretty busy, and I don't want to keep you for too much longer. If you have any closing thoughts, I mean, what do you think the bottom line for all of this is?
Well, I think the bottom line is that as they have proposed the rules, EPA is definitely putting a target on coal and is definitely trying to move the country rapidly away from coal use. And if they do it in the way that they propose, we are going to see very major economic impacts that are going to come both from, the reduction in coal use and coal production here in the United States, but also in terms of higher electricity prices, which are going to ripple through the entire economy. And so we hope that EPA will hear, from the American people, and will be able to moderate these rules as they move forward with them, and get them in a place where we can have a transition, away from, a coal-based dependency into a healthy, maintain a healthy fuel mix that involves, nuclear and natural gas and renewables and coal long into the future.
And I want to thank you for taking a few minutes to talk with us this morning. Michael Whatley from the Consumer Energy Alliance, the website, let me see if I got it right, consumerenergyalliance.org. And I want to...
Yes, sir, that's right, and we appreciate your time. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much for joining me, and hopefully we'll get a chance to talk to you again, hopefully on better circumstances next time. Maybe once we beat...
Absolutely, look forward to it.
Maybe once we beat this thing, we'll get in touch with you.
There we go.
Hey, thanks a lot. And there you go, Michael Whatley from the Consumer Energy Alliance. News Talk 1270 KIML.